This broadcast is dedicated to showing you the unvarnished reality of our courts and streets. Expect nothing less than unfiltered, unedited, and exceptionally raw footage. We place you directly on the front lines of justice, delivering the facts without any distortion.
Officer, I need you to hear me. My mother is on life support at UAB right now. My family has been called in. I am asking you please to let me through.
Step out of the vehicle, sir.
Did you hear what I said to you?
I heard you. Out of the vehicle, now.
That's my sister. She's at the hospital.
Family to bedside, final goodbyes. But before he could get there, Officer Mitch Greer pulled him over, looked him up and down, and decided a black man dressed that well must be hiding something. He searched everything, found nothing, kept him there anyway while the minutes ran out. What Greer didn't know was that the man standing outside that car in the cold, calm, composed, phone ringing in his pocket, was about to become the reason Greer's name appeared in a federal complaint, a lawsuit, and every local headline for the next 6 months. Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where you're tuning in from here at Bodycam Revealed. If you believe no badge gives anyone the right to steal a man's last moments with his mother, then hit the like button and subscribe to Bodycam Revealed, because that is exactly what this story is about. Birmingham, Alabama sits in a valley carved out by the Appalachian foothills, and on most nights, the city is quieter than people expect. The downtown corridors empty out after business hours. The hospital district along 6th Avenue North stays lit all night. The UAB Medical Center complex never fully sleeps, but the roads feeding into it thin out after 10. Street lamps line the route on 8th Avenue, and if you know Birmingham, you know that stretch between the interstate exit on I-65 and the hospital entrance is exactly the kind of road where nothing is supposed to happen. It is a straight shot. A 7-minute drive on a slow night. The kind of road a man takes when he has no time to waste. Kelton Sams, 44, knew that road the way he knew most things. Precisely. He had driven it before, years ago, when his father had a health scare that turned out to be nothing. He remembered where the lights were long, where traffic sometimes bunched near the intersection at 12th Street, and how the hospital parking structure came into view just before the final turn. He was thinking about all of that on the night of March 4th. As he merged off I-65 South and straightened his tie at the wheel, not out of vanity, out of habit. Kelton Sams was a man who kept himself composed even when everything inside him was not. He was the district attorney for Jefferson County, Alabama. Had been for 6 years. Before that, he spent 8 years as a prosecutor in the same office. The kind of prosecutor who prepared so thoroughly that defense attorneys stopped being surprised when he won. He had tried over 200 cases. He had argued before the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals. He had sat across from federal agents, city officials, police chiefs, and sitting judges, and he had never once walked into a room unprepared. He was known in Birmingham's legal community as someone who did not grandstand, did not play to cameras, and did not lose cases he should win. He was also known as someone who remembered everything. On the night of March 4th, he was not thinking about any of that. He was thinking about his mother. Odessa Sams had been admitted to UAB Medical Center 4 days earlier with what her primary care doctor initially described as complications from a respiratory infection. By the second day, the picture had changed. By the third, her condition had deteriorated in ways the attending physicians struggled to get ahead of. By the fourth day, that Tuesday, the family had received the kind of call that reorders everything. Come now, bring whoever needs to be there. She was 71 years old, and she was running out of time. Kelton had been in a meeting when the call came through. He had ended it mid-sentence, told his deputy to handle the rest of the week, and gone home to change. He put on the charcoal suit he had worn to court that morning because there was no time to change into something else, and because, somewhere in the back of his mind, he wanted to look like himself when he walked into that room. His mother had always told him he looked like his father when he wore that suit. He wanted her to see that one more time. He was 7 minutes from the hospital when the lights came on behind him. Blue and red pulsing in the rearview mirror. He checked his speed. He was at 34 in a 35 zone. He had not run a light. He had not changed lanes erratically. He pulled over immediately, easing the car to the curb on 8th Avenue near the intersection with 14th Street, and put his hands on the wheel where they could be seen. He had done this before. He knew what composed looked like, and he knew why it mattered. Officer Mitch Greer had been with the Birmingham Police Department for 9 years. He worked the late patrol on the Southside District, and by most accounts from his own colleagues, he was someone who ran hot. Not in the way that gets documented easily, but in the way that colleagues quietly account for when they ride with him. He had 2 prior complaints in his file. One from 2019 involving an allegation of excessive language during a traffic stop. One from 2021 involving a use of force report that was reviewed and filed without disciplinary action. Neither had slowed him down. He had a way of reading situations through a lens that his supervisors had never formally examined. And on the night of March 4th, that lens landed on a black man in a charcoal suit, driving a clean, dark blue Lexus ES350 through a quiet stretch of road near the hospital district. The taillight, the left rear, had a crack in the housing. It was still functional, still emitting light, but the housing itself was visibly damaged. It was a legal basis for a stop. It was also the kind of infraction that most officers on that stretch, on that night, would have let pass without a second look. Greer did not let it pass. He approached the driver's side with his flashlight already up, angling it through the window before Kelton had fully rolled it down. The light swept across the interior. The leather seats, the briefcase in the back, the court documents folded on the passenger seat, the suit jacket hanging from the hook above the rear door. "License and registration," Greer said. Kelton had both ready. He handed them over without reaching suddenly, without fumbling. His voice was steady when he spoke. "Officer, I need you to know. My mother is at UAB Medical Center right now. She's on life support. My family has been called in. I'm asking you please to let me get there as quickly as possible." Greer looked at the license, looked at Kelton, looked back at the license. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" "I'm assuming the taillight," Kelton said. "I understand. I'll have it repaired, but I need to get to that hospital." Greer handed nothing back. He stepped slightly away from the window, shining the flashlight into the back seat again. His eyes moved slowly across the interior in a way that had nothing to do with the taillight. "Where are you coming from tonight?" "My home, on Shadescrest Road. I came straight from home when I got the call." "You always drive around in a suit this late?" Kelton kept his hands on the wheel. "I came from work earlier and didn't have time to change." "Officer, I'm not exaggerating about my mother. I'm asking you. Please." Greer looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "Step out of the vehicle." Kelton's phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. He felt it against his chest. One ring, then silence, then almost immediately another. He recognized the pattern. His sister Simone called that way when she needed him to pick up. He opened the door slowly, both hands visible, and stepped out onto the sidewalk in his charcoal suit on a cool Birmingham night, 7 minutes from the hospital, while his phone rang and his mother's time ran out. Kelton Sam stood on the sidewalk on 8th Avenue with his hands at his sides and his phone buzzing against his chest. He had done everything right. He had pulled over without hesitation, kept his hands visible, spoken clearly, and told Officer Mitch Greer exactly what was happening and exactly where he needed to be. None of it had mattered. Greer had ordered him out of the car anyway, and now Kelton was standing on the curb in his charcoal suit, watching the officer walk a slow circle around the Lexus with his flashlight moving across every window like he had all the time in the world. Because as far as Greer was concerned, he did. Greer started with the exterior. He ran the light along the door panels, crouched to look beneath the front bumper, and checked the wheel wells on both sides. Then he came back to the driver's window, reached in, and popped the trunk without asking. The sound of it releasing made Kelton close his eyes for just a second. He opened them and looked straight ahead. His phone buzzed again. This time it rang longer before stopping. He recognized Simone's number on the screen when he glanced down. He looked at Greer, who was standing at the open trunk now, pushing aside the emergency kit and the folded umbrella and the spare tire cover. Kelton spoke carefully. "Officer Greer, That's my sister calling from the hospital. I need to answer that. Greer didn't look up. You'll answer it when we're done. There was no reason given, no explanation for what they were looking for or how long this was going to take. Greer just kept moving, pulling the spare tire cover fully aside and then letting it fall back into place when there was nothing underneath it. He moved to the back seat next, opening the rear door and leaning in with the flashlight. He went through the back seat pocket, checked under the seats, and then picked up the stack of court documents sitting on the front passenger seat and looked at them the way someone looks at something they don't fully understand but don't want to admit it. Kelton watched all of this from the sidewalk. He was not handcuffed. He had not been told he was being detained or told he was free to go. He existed in the in-between space that these stops create. Technically free, practically stuck, with no real option but to stand there and wait. 14 minutes had passed since the stop began. His phone rang again. This time it was a number he recognized as his cousin Merrick, who had driven in from Tuscaloosa that afternoon to be with the family. Merrick only called when something had changed. Kelton stared at the screen until the call dropped, and he felt something shift in his chest. Not panic, not yet, but the specific and terrible feeling of time moving without him. Greer came back around to where Kelton was standing. You got anything in your pockets I need to know about? No, Kelton said. Keys, wallet, phone, anything else? Just those, and my work badge. Greer looked at the badge for a moment. The Jefferson County District Attorney's Office seal was on it, clear and legible, and then handed it back without a word. He went back to his patrol car and sat inside. Through the windshield, Kelton could see him on the radio or the computer terminal, though it was hard to tell which. The blue light was still rotating on the roof. Passing cars slowed slightly as they went by, their drivers looking over at the scene before moving on. 26 minutes had now passed. A second patrol car pulled up behind Greer's. The officer who stepped out was younger, and he walked to Greer's window first before coming over to where Kelton was standing. He introduced himself as Officer Daniels and asked Kelton if he knew why he had been pulled over. Kelton told him about the taillight. He also told him, again, about his mother, about UAB Medical Center, about the family that was already there. Daniels listened. His expression shifted slightly. Not enough to do anything about it, but enough that Kelton noticed. Daniels looked back toward Greer's car and then back at Kelton. Just hang tight, Daniels said. Shouldn't be too much longer. But it was longer. Greer came back out of his patrol car and told Kelton he was running a full check on the vehicle and the registration. Kelton asked him what he was looking for. Greer said it was standard procedure. It was not standard procedure for a broken taillight stop. Kelton knew that. Daniels, standing a few feet away, almost certainly knew that. But the stop continued. 38 minutes. Simone called again. This time, Kelton looked at Greer and spoke with as much restraint as he had left. My mother may be dying right now while I'm standing on this sidewalk. I'm asking you one more time. Please let me answer my phone and let me go. Greer looked at him. Sir, I need you to stay calm. Kelton had not raised his voice. He had not moved from the spot where he was standing. He had been calm for 38 minutes, and Greer was telling him to stay calm. He looked down at the pavement for a moment and said nothing, because there was nothing left to say that Greer was going to hear. His phone went to voicemail. Then it rang again almost immediately. This time the screen showed his cousin Parnell, who had flown in from Atlanta and who Kelton knew would not be calling unless the situation had gotten worse. He let it ring. 44 minutes into the stop, Greer finally came back with the license and registration. He handed them to Kelton along with a written warning for the taillight. Not a citation, not a ticket, a warning. And told him he was free to go. The trunk was still slightly open from when Greer had gone through it earlier. Kelton closed it himself, got back into the driver's seat, and pulled away from the curb. He drove the remaining 7 minutes to UAB Medical Center doing exactly the speed limit because his hands were shaking and he needed to focus on the road. He pulled into the parking structure on 6th Avenue, found the first open space he saw, and ran. He ran through the ground floor entrance, past the information desk, down the corridor toward the elevator bank that served the fourth floor cardiac and critical care wing. He pressed the button and waited, and while he waited, he finally called Simone back. She answered on the first ring. She didn't say hello. She just said his name. He already knew from the way she said it. He rode the elevator to the fourth floor anyway. He walked the corridor to room 412. The door was open. The family was still there. Simone, Merrick, Parnell, their Aunt Claudette sitting in the chair by the window with her hands folded in her lap. The machines in the room were quieter than they should have been. Odessa Sams had passed 11 minutes before Kelton walked through that door. 11 minutes. He stood in the doorway of that room in his charcoal suit, the same suit his mother had always said made him look like his father, and he did not go in right away. He stood there and looked at her, and then he looked at his phone, and he thought about the 44 minutes he had spent on a sidewalk on 8th Avenue, while a man with a badge and a flashlight searched a clean car and found absolutely nothing. Kelton Sams did not fall apart in that hospital room. He walked in, sat beside his mother's bed, took her hand, and stayed there with his family for the next 2 hours. He did not talk much, neither did anyone else. Simone sat across from him, and at some point she reached over and put her hand on his arm, and that was the most either of them could offer the other that night. Their Aunt Claudette prayed quietly in the corner chair. Merrick and Parnell stood near the window. The room was full of people who had made it in time, and one person who had not. When Kelton finally left the hospital that night, he sat in his car in the parking structure on 6th Avenue for a long time before he started the engine. He was not crying. He was thinking. He was thinking about the 44 minutes, about the flashlight moving through his back seat, about the warning slip sitting in his jacket pocket for a taillight that still worked. He was thinking about every call he had let ring through to voicemail while he stood on that sidewalk, and about the 11 minutes between when his mother passed and when he walked through that door. He thought about all of it very carefully, the way he had been trained to think about things, in sequence, in detail, with nothing left out. Then he drove home and started making calls. The first call was to the Birmingham Police Department's Office of Professional Standards. He did not call as a grieving son. He called as the District Attorney of Jefferson County, and he asked in plain and direct language for the body cam footage from Officer Mitch Greer's patrol shift on the night of March 4th to be preserved immediately. He explained the stop. He gave the time, the location, the badge number he had memorized while standing on that sidewalk, and the duration. The person on the other end of the line was quiet for a moment before confirming that the request had been logged. The footage was pulled within 48 hours. What it showed was not complicated. It did not require interpretation or debate. The body cam recorded the entire stop from the moment Greer stepped out of his patrol car to the moment Kelton pulled away from the curb. It showed Kelton's hands on the wheel before the window was even down. It showed him handing over his license and registration calmly, without hesitation. It showed him telling Greer about his mother, clearly, directly, with his voice steady. Within the first 90 seconds of the stop, it showed Greer saying nothing in response to that and ordering him out of the car anyway. It showed the trunk being opened without consent being asked for or given. It showed Greer going through the back seat, the court documents, the emergency kit, the spare tire area. It showed 44 minutes of a search that produced nothing, interrupted twice by Kelton respectfully asking to answer his phone, and twice being told to wait. It showed the written warning being issued at the end for a taillight, and it showed Greer's body language throughout the stop, the slow and unhurried way he moved from one part of the car to the next, while a man in a suit stood on the sidewalk and his phone rang. The footage was reviewed by the Office of Professional Standards and then by the department's Internal Affairs Division. Both reviews reached the same conclusion. There was no articulable justification for the length of the stop. The search of the vehicle had no documented probable cause attached to it. The request to contact a family member during a medical emergency had been denied twice without legal basis. The stop, from the 14-minute mark onward, could not be defended procedurally. That finding was significant on its own. What made it larger was who Kelton Sams was. Within days of the footage being reviewed, It had been seen by the Jefferson County Sheriff, the Birmingham City Attorney's Office, and 2 members of the City Council. Kelton had not leaked it. He had not called the press. He had simply filed the complaint through the correct channels and let the footage speak in the way that footage, when it is clear and unedited, always speaks. But Birmingham is not a large city in the way that makes things easy to contain. And word moved quickly through the legal and civic community that the man Officer Mitch Greer had held on a sidewalk for 44 minutes while his mother lay dying was the district attorney. Reporters began calling the department for comment within the week. The department issued a short statement confirming that an internal review was underway and that the matter was being taken seriously. They did not name Greer in the statement. They did not need to. His name was already circulating. Simone Sams spoke to a local Birmingham news station 8 days after her mother's death. She did not speak about Greer by name. She spoke about her mother, about Odessa Sams, who had worked as a school administrator for 31 years in the Birmingham City school system, who had raised 3 children largely on her own after her husband passed, and who had spent her final weeks surrounded by people who loved her. Simone said that the family had been there, all of them, and that her brother had not made it in time, and that the reason he had not made it in time was sitting in a police database on a server somewhere, recorded in full and completely undeniable. The interview ran that evening. By the next morning, it had been picked up by 2 regional outlets and 1 national news aggregator. The comments filled quickly. People who had their own versions of the story, their own sidewalks, their own minutes that had been taken from them for no reason at all. Odessa Sams had spent 31 years shaping the lives of children in Birmingham's public schools. In the end, it was her death that put her son's name in the national conversation about what a badge is supposed to mean and what it is never supposed to cost. The Birmingham Police Department did not move slowly once the footage became impossible to ignore. Within 3 weeks of the Internal Affairs Review being completed, Officer Mitch Greer was formally suspended without pay pending a disciplinary hearing. The department notified his union representative, filed the necessary paperwork with the city's Civil Service Board, and issued a second public statement. This one longer than the first, and more specific. It acknowledged that the stop on March 4th had not been conducted within departmental guidelines. It acknowledged that the duration of the stop was not justified by the circumstances. It stopped short of saying anything about bias directly, but the language it used left very little room for a different interpretation. Greer did not speak publicly. His union representative issued a brief statement saying that he intended to cooperate fully with the process and that there were details of the stop not reflected in public reporting. No additional details were provided. The statement did not mention Odessa Sams. Kelton did not comment on the department's actions. He had recused himself from any matters involving the Birmingham Police Department that crossed his office while the investigation was active, and he had handed those files to his deputy without discussion. He understood exactly where the line was, and he stayed on his side of it. That discipline, the ability to separate his personal grief from his professional conduct, was noted by people who watched how he handled the weeks that followed, and it said more about who he was than anything he could have stated directly. The family filed a civil lawsuit 41 days after Odessa Sams passed. The suit was filed in the United States District Court for the Northern District of Alabama and named Officer Mitch Greer and the City of Birmingham as defendants. The claims included violation of Fourth Amendment rights through an unlawful detention and warrantless search, and a separate claim grounded in the deliberate indifference to a clearly stated medical emergency. The family's attorney, a civil rights litigator named Anselm Parrish, who had handled cases in 5 states, held a press conference on the steps of the Hugo L. Black Federal Courthouse on 5th Avenue North the morning the suit was filed. Parrish was measured and precise in the way that effective attorneys tend to be when the facts are already doing the heavy work. He said that no dollar amount would be assigned to the 11 minutes Kelton had lost. He said the family was not primarily interested in a settlement. They wanted a court to look at that footage, look at the timeline, and say clearly and on the record what it showed. He said that Odessa Sams had spent 31 years giving to the children of Birmingham, and that the least the city could do was tell the truth about what happened the night her son tried to get to her and was stopped for no legitimate reason by a man who was supposed to protect people, not delay them. The press conference lasted 12 minutes. The clip of Parrish's closing statement was shared widely enough that it reached audiences well outside Alabama. Inside the department, the consequences moved on a separate track. The disciplinary hearing for Greer was scheduled for 6 weeks after his suspension. The hearing board reviewed the footage, the internal affairs findings, the 2 prior complaints in his file, and testimony from Officer Daniels, who had arrived as backup that night and who confirmed, under questioning, that the length of the stop had seemed unusual to him at the time. Daniels had not intervened. He said he wished he had. That admission was recorded in the hearing transcript and later became part of a broader conversation the department was forced to have about what bystander officers are required to do when a stop does not look right. Greer was terminated at the conclusion of the hearing. The board cited the lack of justification for the extended detention, the absence of documented probable cause for the vehicle search, and his prior complaint history as factors in the decision. His termination was upheld when his union filed an appeal with the Civil Service Board 2 months later. The city eventually reached a settlement with the Sams family before the federal case went to trial. The terms were not disclosed publicly at the family's request, but Anselm Parrish confirmed in a brief written statement that the family was satisfied that the process had been completed and that accountability had been established through multiple channels: the internal investigation, the termination, and the civil resolution. He also confirmed that part of the agreement included a requirement for the Birmingham Police Department to revise its written policy on traffic stop duration and to implement documented supervisory review for any stop exceeding 20 minutes. That policy change was quiet. It did not make national news, but it was the part of the outcome that Kelton said mattered most in the one interview he gave after everything had concluded. He sat across from a local reporter in a conference room in his office and spoke for about 20 minutes. He talked about his mother, about who she was, about the school where she had worked for most of her career, about the way she used to call him every Sunday morning regardless of what was happening in his week. He talked about the lawsuit and what the family had hoped to accomplish with it. And then, near the end of the interview, the reporter asked him what he wanted people to take away from everything that had happened. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said that he wanted people to understand that what happened to him on 8th Avenue on the night of March 4th did not happen to him because of who he was. It happened to him because of what the officer saw when he looked through that window. And there were people it happened to who did not have his access, his resources, or his ability to pick up a phone and make the right calls afterward. Those people deserved the same outcome. That was the part that was still unfinished. He was right. It was. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Every share puts this in front of people who may never have seen it otherwise. And on Bodycam Revealed, that is exactly the point. We will keep telling these stories until they stop needing to be told.
We exist to pursue the truth, no matter where it leads. It is our duty to hold power to account and shine a light on the facts. After all, the records don't lie. Thanks for watching and joining the conversation.